Now, Straight Talk. Murray Langdon on CFAX 1070.
Liberal Party of Canada is still looking for a full-time leader. It's not your average job posting. You know, one time this was the be-all and end-all job in political life in Canada. There was a queue so long we probably couldn't even imagine it. So many Canadians would say that, you know, their dream could be to be Prime Minister of Canada. And if you were associated with the Liberal Party and you happen to be the leader, there's a very good chance you were going to end up there. It really was a great job. You're the head of the naturally governing party. Odds are that you're going to end up atop the political power structure at some point. Now the job has changed. Doesn't have quite the same glamour. Doesn't have quite the same pull. The party is in not the same shape. So who's going to step forward? We know it's not going to be interim leader Bob Rae, which quite frankly doesn't surprise me, although many people suspiciously believed that he was going to take a run at it. Maybe he thought about it. He was a stranger to leading a party. He had been a premier. He said, no, I don't want it. Now what happens? Joining us for a conversation on the line from Toronto, Peter Coleman, President and CEO of the National Citizens Coalition. Peter, great to have you back on CFAX 1070.
Thanks for having me on, Murray.
Talk about the Liberal Party and what it can add to the political landscape, because clearly the LPC is a different construct. It's in a different shape than it used to be.
Yeah, I think the problem for the party now is people, you know, to your intro, people don't know what their brand is or their identity is, and they seem to have lost their way. If you sort of think back to Paul Martin's era when he was Prime Minister, he was supposed to destroy Harper and get 210 seats, and he hung on with a minority government, and then the Conservatives got their act together and took over power minority situation too. So the party's been, you know, in a free fall really for about 7 or 8 years with no clear identity. They don't own a mushy middle anymore. So there are significant challenges for whoever decides to throw their hat in the ring and become party leader. And I think that's why Bob Rae said no ultimately.
You talk about owning an issue. You know, rightly or wrongly, the Tories will say we're really in favor of an aggressive energy policy. We really believe in the oil sands / tar sands. We really believe in Canada's potential as an energy player. The NDP will say we're really focused on seniors and families. You know, rightly or wrongly, they'll hang their hat on that. And you're right, Peter. Like the Liberal Party, you could say the Liberal Party really thinks what? Nothing. There's no clear identifiable statement.
Yeah, and that's the problem. I think that's the problem with what's going on. I mean, Ray's chance would have been the best chance would have been in the leadership convention when Stéphane Dion came through the middle, when Ray and Ignatieff were supposed to be two best friends, and they both knew they were going to lose if they didn't cross the floor or shake somebody's hands, and they did. And then, you know, Ignatieff, to be fair, was terrible. I mean, worse than that. And he came back, thought there'd be a coronation. Again, you talked about this in the introduction. There'd be a coronation of him as leader of the party. Then he would run into becoming Prime Minister automatically. It didn't work that way. So they've been in a slide for a while, and I'm not sure who wants to take this process along, because I think Justin Trudeau, in my view, is a little green for the process. I know he'll get a lot of pressure to run, but I'm not sure he's the right guy for the right time.
And what happened with Ignatieff, Peter? Why did he become such, I don't want to say a dud or a flop, but really did not fare well at all?
You know, I think part of the process for them, where the problem was, if you think where the Conservatives were when they had the Progressive Conservative Party and the Reform Party, and they were nowhere near to being in power. It took them 10 years to get their act together, and then they merged, and they became a force where the Liberals couldn't win by splitting the two right side of the spectrum votes. The Liberals, I think Ignatieff just thought he would come back. He got, you know, acclaimed in his riding. He got acclaimed as the interim leader. And the process was just skewed where the party wasn't represented anymore. And there's still two camps in the Liberal Party, the Paul Martin camp and the Jean Chrétien camp. And those two parts of the party seem to still be fighting. And they've got to figure out what the reason to be around is and stop fighting internally so they can put a message forward that the Canadian people would support.
Well, and that's the ugly work that the Tories had to do, to fall apart as the Progressive Conservatives, for the Reform to take center stage, for the CCRAP, whatever that horrible acronym was, to evolve, and then the Alliance, and then what we see now. Those were some ugly years. That was a 10 to 12, 13-year battle.
Yeah, and I know it was Stephen Harper who was president of the National Citizen Coalition before he went back into politics. He was not very good, to be honest, at retail politics when he left here. But he did the dirty work, the barbecue circuit, and did that for years. And he became much better at those kind of things that you have to do to become a leader. And the Liberals have lost their way that way and haven't done a great job of grassroots connecting. And they need to get back to that if they're going to have a reason to be. But they moved too far left. The Conservatives have now sort of control in that mushy middle, if you will. The Conservatives moved, I think, a bit further left than they like to be. But and the NDP is a force, certainly in Quebec. I mean, but so I don't know where the Liberals fit in to get, because the next leader's got to appeal to certain areif out west. I mean, out west, Trudeau's name's not going to sell well, I don't think.
Never. Never.
So it's like, if Trudeau becomes their leader, do you give up on the West, which means you have no chance ever to form government? They have a very tricky situation to work their way through. And I know people say in elections that only 40% supported Harper, 60% didn't. That's always been the way with majority governments. Chrétien's majority governments are the same way too. So it's critical the Liberals find somebody that can go across spectrums, rural, urban, east, west, and Trudeau, in my view, is not the guy that's going to do that. But he'll be getting intense pressure to go because he's the great next savior. But somebody said a funny line. He said the problem with Justin Trudeau is he's his mother's son, not his father's son.
And that's a big difference.
Yeah. And I think Trudeau's a capable guy, but I think he's very green and very young. And, I just would think he'd have a tough time in the process. He's certainly young enough to do it, because whoever's in power, whoever takes that role there is not going to become prime minister until at least 2019, because even if the Conservatives lose in 2015 and it's a minority government, you have a hard time seeing where the Liberals go from 30-odd seats up to, say, 70 or 80 if they don't start attracting seats in Ontario and out west.
We're speaking with Peter Coleman, President and CEO of the National Citizens Coalition. Let me ask you, Peter, I mean, to me, the job right now as the Liberal leader of the Liberal Party of Canada is more of is almost a lifesaver / caretaker. You've got to resuscitate this party. You've got to bring out the paddles. You're not thinking about electoral supremacy. You're thinking about salvation, hanging on. This isn't the person that's going to be prime minister. This is the person that's going to help them get through that ugly period.
And I think, to be fair with Bob Rae, I think he did a pretty fair job of sort of stemming the tide. I think I think Bob Rae, we certainly had fun with him over the years when he was Premier of Ontario with the bye-bye Bob Rae ads and Business Booster Man of the Year and stuff like that. But Bob Rae is an intelligent, capable guy, and you would hope that the Harper government would find an ambassador spot or somewhere where Harper could provide some value. Rae could provide some value for the country. But I just don't know who that guy's going to be. It's going to want to slug that out for probably 8 years. And then that's the challenge, right? Because you've got to say, if I take this job, the old days where the Liberal leader became prime minister are over automatically. He's going to have to work for it. And there's a lot of work to be done. So I don't know who in the cast of characters will be the guy coming to the forefront that has those skill sets.
And that's why I ask. I mean, and you're a plugged-in guy. Do you think there's a man or woman out there? I mean, to me, the next leader of the party could be someone that isn't a household name at all. May not even be a sitting MP.
Yeah, you hear names. I mean, there was guys respected guys like John Manning that could cross both sides of the aisle, if you will, as far as reaching out to Conservatives and that too. But I think people like Manley have had their time, McKenna have had their time, and they're doing very well in the private sector, and they know if they go back in that it's going to be a long slog. You hear Mark Carney's name raised once in a while, but why would Mark Carney want that? I mean, they're talking with him for much more senior roles in, the IMF and things like that if he leaves the Governor Bank of Canada. So I'm not sure who the person outside the political spectrum is right now, but you have to be kidding me if you think it's going to be somebody like Dalton McKinley's brother. I mean, not a chance.
So if the pickings are slim, I mean, not only do you have to be the kind of person, Peter, that can, rejuvenate a political movement or ideas or ideology, you've also got to be adept at fundraising, doing that barbecue circuit, and reconnecting with Canadians with a plan, something that resonates with them.
Yeah, I mean, all their natural constituents that they had, some of the new Canadians in the immigrant file and some of the things. I mean, Harper's principled stand, for example, with Israel, whether you like it or not, has really helped in the Jewish community, and rightfully so. So some of that vote left the Liberal Party. Jason Kenney's done a lot of work with with newer people who come to this country as far as explaining their values, their conservative values, for years. And they call him Minister of Curry in a Hurry because he's always doing fundraisers and events with the ethnic community, and good for him. the Liberal Party has gotten lazy over the last 5 or 6 years, in my view. They don't reach the grassroots in the way they need to, so they look at themselves in the mirror and say, how do we become a relevant force? Because I don't think a merger is very likely with the NDP right now, because they're saying, why would we merge with you? We got way more seats than you do. So I don't know how. And they have to go back and say, what do we really stand for? What is our brand? Because the old branding of Liberal Party is dead and gone, and that's the challenge. How do you get people back to your party when you haven't gotten the identity of your brand right now? And
are people willing to do that? If we still have these divided camps on display, the Chrétienites and the Martinites, how could anyone reasonably think this party is set to heal?
Yeah, they've had a tough time since Chrétien. When he changed the funding mechanism as far as the corporate money and the union money to reduce those numbers down, that was strictly a shot at Paul Martin, but it's crippled the party because they've never been great at grassroots fundraising. They still aren't. They still get outraised a lot by the Conservatives. It's not even close, quite frankly, and they've got to find a juggernaut to get their way through and raise more money and create a profile, and it's not going to be very easy in a short period of time. So someone's going to have to be patient and say this is a 5 or 6 or 7 year job, and I'm not sure a lot of really qualified people want to lead a third-ranked party for 5 or 6 years with no chance of smelling power for quite a while. And maybe no opportunity to do it down the road if there is an heir apparent that is lurking, i.e. a Justin Trudeau, rightly or wrongly. Yeah, no, and it's like look, at anybody that goes into public life, there's a fair share of credit. It's a very tough job. They have great perks, but it's a thankless job in a lot of ways. You do a lot of work away from your family. It's not an easy job. It's a very nice job when you're there, and pensions that are far too cushy for our liking, but it's a tough job, and I'm just not sure Trudeau with a young family wants to spend 6 or 7 years doing that. And he's not going to get the boost from his dad's name out west, as you and I talked about earlier. That's not going to help him. So I don't know who the person really is, because right now it's almost like the country's got a choice. You got a choice in the Conservatives and the NDP, and the Liberals are kind of stuck saying, well, I want to appeal to both sides. I can be a bit left or a bit right when I got to be, but people are saying we don't know what you stand for, what you believe in, and I think that's their real problem. Do you think the party is in jeopardy? I have, quite frankly, thought so for a while. I mean, I said it to many of my Liberal friends. I didn't think Bob Rae was a great move for the party to be the leader. I mean, a former NDP premier. And I think that's why, the attack ads that people like us ran and the Conservatives ran against Rae, saying we can't afford Rae at a federal level. People inside the Liberal Party struggle with attacking back. Some say, why should we support Bob Rae when he's NDP premier? Tom Mulcair was also a Liberal Party member at one point. Now he's the NDP leader. So there's been some moving around there, and Mulcair's not going to want to give the ground he has in Quebec, which used to be the Liberal sort of bastion. Between that and Ontario, they would get close to a majority government with a few seats out west. So the demographics have changed. The census have changed. There's more seats in Ontario. There's more seats out west, as you know. So it's a tough one. And if they're not careful, they won't survive the next 10 years. I mean, you never say never in politics because, a week can be a long time, but their road is an uphill one for sure. The head of the National Citizens Coalition is joining us, Peter Coleman. How big of a role do you think redistribution plays, Peter? Because that's another 30 seats. Yeah, and I think, to be fair, if you look at those 30 seats, there's certainly more friendly to the Conservative Party than the rest of the Liberal Party. When the Liberals got their majority governments, it was because a lot of times when they would run the table in Ontario because the PCs and Reform Party would split, they come up through the middle. That day's gone. So Ontario is much more back in play, if you will, that no one's going to rule that province, but the Liberals did in the Chrétien. And out west, Mulcair's not making very good noises as far as the oil sands and conversation there. And the Liberal brand, I think they have like 7 or 8 seats west of Ontario. I'm not sure how they pull that up. And with more seats coming out west and more seats in Ontario next election, it's going to hurt. Well, we've seen that in BC. I mean, they are extinct in Alberta. Mm-hmm. They may have 1 seat in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. Mm-hmm. That's awful. And in BC, I think they've got a couple of seats, and they barely hung on to those. And one of them was Hetty Fry. You take her out of the equation, that seat's gone overnight. Yeah, for sure. I mean, she was able to buck the National Party trend, and Ralph Goodell's very popular still out in Saskatchewan. That's their only seat in Saskatchewan, too. So, I mean, it's just, it's a hard one to figure when we look across the country how they're going to become relevant again out west in the near term. I mean, maybe they can do some things in and around Toronto, but they already have a bunch of seats there that they're going to fight out with the NDP, and I just don't know where they grow their party, and the redistribution does not help them in that math either.
What do you think Canadians want to hear? What do you think Canadians are looking for?
You know, I to be honest, I think we need a clear alternative to the federal Conservatives. I mean, as an organization, we're supportive of any group that we think is fiscally conservative. That's what we believe in, like respect for taxpayers' money and value. There isn't, and we get criticized for that a lot, but the federal Conservatives, to be honest, have not been nearly as conservative with the finances as we like to see, but they've done a better job by and large than most countries around the world managing our affairs, and we're fortunate for that. But
subtracting the F-35s from that debate.
Yeah, that whole thing is just ridiculous. I mean, the communications and the non-truths and that stuff's incredible. But you'd like to see another alternative to the federal Conservatives that you could say, well, we could put them into power if the Conservatives became, too arrogant, weren't spending money the proper way. I mean, the F-35 for sure is a bad example for them, not a shining piece of work. But the shipbuilding contract was again an example of how things should get done. So we want to see another alternative at the federal level. And right now, unfortunately, the Liberals aren't that alternative, and I'm not sure that Mulcair's going to be, with the way he's come out of the gate, is going to, at the end of the day in election 2015, I don't think he's going to sell out west, and he's going to have a tough time keeping his base his base of power is all in Quebec.
What do you think the average Canadian, aside from the fiscal component, Peter, I think people are also looking for an idea, a sense of who can define Canada. I mean, it sounds kind of hocusy-pocusy. I think they do care about the money. I think they do care about the environment. I think they do care about jobs. But there's also something, the one knock against Stephen Harper is he comes across as a truly charmless man. He really does.
Yeah, you know what, and I know him on a personal level fairly well, and he's not that way at all in person. It's a real enigma for me to see that come across. I mean, I don't think he likes to talk to the media for the sake of talking. I wish he'd do more because he could sort of expand his vision for the country. I think there's some opportunities in the Arctic for development. I think as a country we're starting to get back to that old stupid line of punching above our own weight as far as international affairs because of how we've sacrificed ourselves in Afghanistan and other places, and how, our banking system's been sound, how our economy's been fairly well managed. And Liberals get credit for some of that, too, going back into Chrétien's days as well. So I think people are saying, what is the vision thing? I think the Conservatives still haven't come up with what really their vision is, other than they've been saying it's the economy, stupid, and we'll focus on that. But the grander picture, I'm not sure what that is either. How
soon does that have to come out? I mean, I know an election's 3 years away, but...
I would think the Prime Minister, you've probably got to think about your time now. That's what is my legacy, signature going to be when I'm decide to leave politics and move on to greener pastures somewhere else. You would think that they should be thinking about that bigger picture stuff now because they have the time with the majority government to say, you wish they'd be a little gentler around the edges. The communication strategy isn't the greatest. They're a little too harsh sometimes, but I think by and large, fiscally, for the most part, they've been relatively okay, far from perfect. But again, that vision thing, I'm not sure what they think that might be. Are we an Arctic country as far as exploring things up there? Is that a big issue for us going forward? Solving the native Indian issues, is that a big issue for the Harper government? I think that those are kind of things he might be looking at, but your guess is as good as mine.
Peter Coleman is President, CEO of the National Citizens Coalition. Peter, thanks.